from the, let me just do that. Yeah, from the London Freedom Seed Bank. Yeah, thanks Caroline for helping organise this, and thank you for the South London Channel Institute for having us. So I'm one of the steering group members for the London Freedom Seed Bank, and I kind of came on board when this project began, so this collaborative seed saving project, which I'll go into later. And it was originally started by another steering group member called Richard Galpin. And I'm going to go through why we developed it, the origins, kind of how it evolved from digitizing our stock and how it's kind of moved into something a bit bigger, and our work as a living seed bank. And yeah, as Caroline said, then we'll hear from Patrick about some of the varieties he's growing out at the moment. He's one of our superstar growers, and kind of top contributors to the database and to the seed bank in general. So London Freedom Seed Bank. So the LFSB is the acronym we use. And I wanted to give you a bit of background on the seed bank itself. So we're a network of London-based gardeners that work across London, kind of sharing and storing and saving open-pollinated seed, and the stories that come with sharing seed. So we were born out of a response to Vandana Shiva, who's a environmental activist and food sovereignty advocate, her 2012 call for a global seed freedom movement, and for all communities to occupy and protect their seeds. So from there, so it's been going for nearly 8 or 9 years now. And yeah, we kind of work on 4 different strands to achieve our kind of aims as a seed bank. And we use the phrase living seed bank, which means that the seeds we save and that our network saves don't usually live with just one member, or they don't live in a kind of temperature controlled seed bank like SLBI, and are instead they're kind of shared with us, and we can record that this has been shared, and we can help facilitate it being shared with other growers. But hopefully, yeah, it's shared with us, the growers, and then it's sown out, cultivated, and hopefully saved again each year, and specifically in London, and looking at growing conditions in London and what varieties do well here. So our vision as a seed bank is we work on these 4 strands, and as part of a wider seed sovereignty movement addressing issues around loss of biodiversity and unsustainable food systems. So we do this through raising awareness of kind of skills and the importance of seed saving, of the issues threatening our seed heritage through reskilling. So we provide trainings for food growers, which is how our network has traditionally kind of expanded, and for schools, all about growing and saving and storing open pollinated seed. So we do kind of preserving through this kind of living seed bank, where we teach people and we train people, and the network trains other people about how to grow and save. And we then kind of preserve these for a while, and then are shared with members of the network. And as I said, yeah, the last strand is sharing and distributing, which is kind of part of the preserving and the sharing and distributing, where we share it. Seed swaps, traditionally, things have been done slightly differently this year with the pandemic, which is a big part, a kind of reason why we created the database as well. But yeah, traditionally we would be doing in-person seed swaps, and going to, we've got lots of community garden spaces that are part of our growers network. So going to these spaces and doing kind of training and sharing of seed. So I thought a good way to get into the database and the collaborative data project, London Freedom Seed Base, which is a crossover between our name, London Freedom Seed Bank, and the word database, but it's all a bit of a mouthful. would be to have a wee look at the seed packets from this year, which in big part have been kind of facilitated by the database itself. So you can see on the seed packets that you've got the kind of information about the plant type and when they were saved and the location, which batch, and notes like kind of tips from the gardener that saved them before. And much of this kind of seed request and kind of sending out system was kind of able to be automated through using the database, and has definitely grown as a result of using the database, but also interest in kind of getting seeds from us has also grown during the pandemic, which I think a lot of seed companies have seen as people have kind of taken more of an interest in being able to grow their own food. So the database allows us to track all this different information, and we'll have a look at that too, but I just thought it was nice to have a wee look at the kind of physical product of this digital thing. So what will happen is that the growers who have received these seeds will grow them out, and hopefully, yeah, they'll be cultivated, and they'll eventually save them, and they'll send them back, and they'll send them back with lots of information, like the kind of growing conditions, maybe notes, maybe recipes that they use them with, whether it tasted nice or not. And yeah, that will feed into the next kind of generation of seed packets too. So you get this kind of lineage of the story of the seed from grower to grower. So a look at the digital side of the database. So this is how people select which seeds they want. So we have a available stock gallery, and the database itself lends itself very well to making things like this, like a kind of seed catalogue, which was part of why we were originally building it, was to facilitate this sort of seed cataloguing and seed request system. But I think what's been interesting is kind of what else we've been able to capture while we've been building this. But it is also lovely to be able to see how much we have here, and also to be able to filter it by what stocks we have, and it makes a lot of things, yeah, a lot more easily for us at the seed bank. So I'm going to go into what the London Freedom Seed Base is. It also kind of works on 4 strands, strangely, or maybe kind of naturally, as we were beginning to design it. So it's a database spreadsheet hybrid built using the software Airtable. Airtable is free to use and has been used a lot recently in food insecurity projects and mutual aid projects because it's free, and also because it allows for you to create a complex database with quite an easy to use interface. And also it allows multiple people to collaborate on the same database remotely, which is good because that's when I came in. I came in October to help build the database. And so I had never met the other people in the seed bank. We've only met recently in person. So yeah, this kind of remote collaboration was necessary because of the pandemic, but also was a big part in why we were able to build this thing. So the 4 strands that we've got are the seed batches, which are the seeds coming in that are saved each year and the information associated with them. The varieties, so a variety will have lots of seed batches year on year, the more it's saved and grown out and saved again. The growers, so our network of growers, and then the growing spaces where people are growing. And it's the capturing of the relationships between these 4 elements that is kind of why we needed a database, which I'll speak a wee bit on later. And just for a bit of jargon, the way that these 4 things are labeled is they're called tables. So they're almost like 4 spreadsheets, but the information from one spreadsheet to another can be kind of referenced, and the information can be kind of woven together to kind of show you how these things interact. So why did we need a database? So yeah, already the kind of complexity of trying to capture what we do as a seed bank and what kind of seed saving looks like in London and what the instances of seed saving are, meant that we needed something that was more kind of dynamic than just something that's quite flat, like a list or a spreadsheet. And so we wanted to be able to track the passing of seed year on year, so we could see how kind of varieties adapt to London conditions, which varieties adapt well as kind of share knowledge amongst growers about varieties that do well in London conditions, but also about, you know, how their experiences of saving seed, and kind of more anecdotal information that has been really interesting to capture. So as a kind of way to illustrate how these things interact, we've got a seed batch here of a lettuce seed batch. So it's a lettuce called Bloody Marvel, which is an experimental lettuce variety that one of our steering group members has been breeding as part of some lettuce varieties. And so it was saved in 2020, the grower who saved it, and the variety. This seed batch will also have lots of other information, like how much light the plants got, how frequently they were watered, different photos, and then the way that connects to the varieties, that you'll have multiple seed batches associated with one variety, and we can begin to build a picture over time in, you know, years to come, about how this particular variety is beginning to adapt, or just how kind of popular it is. There's lots of information we can kind of get from the database itself. And so from there, you've got the grower connected to the seed batch, but you've also got the growing space associated with the grower. So a grower might have many seed batches that they're submitting, but a seed batch for 1 year will have a single grower. So it's this kind of many seed batches to grower, grower to variety, all of these kind of interweaving relationships that we needed to capture, that kind of led to the way it has developed into what it looks like now. And we know that plant varieties become locally adapted as they are grown and saved in one place, and the active seed saving kind of reinforces the traits that make it suitable for London growing. So I'd want to go into a wee bit of the actual database itself, and I thought a good way to be able to show you that would be able to look at the seeds that I've requested this year. So we have a lot more information than this, but from information that I can kind of share with everybody, I thought I would bring up a view of, which seeds I requested this year. So that's kind of the power of the database, is that we've got lots and lots of growers, but I can quite easily filter and make a very readable kind of view of this information that shows exactly what I've requested, and that I can create a kind of personal log for each of our growers as well. And another lovely thing about Airtable is the way that you can kind of translate that information that just then looked very kind of traditionally spreadsheet-like into something that's very readable. So this is these are the seeds that I've requested this year, but these are the kind of different kind of sun conditions that they were grown in. And it's the accessibility of this software and the way that it makes quite what can be particularly like static or flat information accessible to lots of people is a big part in what we were trying to do when creating this, and ultimately when sharing this. So the idea behind this is to share this with our growers network as much as possible, because it's the information that they're giving us that is populating this in the first place. So I thought I'd just give kind of a few other ways that we can see this database. So one of them is the seed submission form. So when a grower is submitting seed in kind of at kind of harvest time, they'll be able to populate the database with the variety they were growing, where they were growing it, other details about light conditions, maybe anecdotal details about how well it grew, any if it had kind of a particular taste, what it was good for recipe wise, and as well as you can kind of zoom in on a particular instance of a seed batch, you can also get statistics that allow us to look at kind of how we're recording seed saving at large. So at the moment, we've got 127 varieties, we've got 179 seed batches, 96 growers, and 58 growing spaces. And in 2020, we received 50 new seed batches and 15 growers submitted seed. And we've got 1,793 packets of seed in total that we can estimate. So this was a very recent project. We were able to kind of historically digitize a bit of the kind of seed instances of seed sharing and seed swapping from what we had of just spreadsheets on Google Drive and lists and pieces of paper. Besides that, it's been, we've managed to kind of build this in time for a big cohort of people submitting seed in kind of autumn time, and now having requested seed and sending it back out as well. So that's what's been really interesting about this project, is that it feels very alive and it feels very interactive because of the way it begins to grow, and it will evolve with our growers network. And the way that the grower network kind of expand the information that we have on growing a particular variety from generation to generation, and you can begin to see patterns of what is popular, and all sorts of other interesting information. So as I've spoken about before, there's quite a lot of taxonomic information that is that lends itself very, very well to being digitized in like a database kind of format. So on the left is actually a historic seed collection from the South London Botanical Institute, which I just had been taken by one of our growers. And I thought that with kind of comparison about how our seeds look currently and also how our database looks to some extent, the similarities between that are like, very, very clear. And that's very fun to do, kind of digitizing all of the taxonomic information. And as I said, it lends itself very well to doing that. But what's also interesting to be able to capture is more anecdotal information, like how people are, what varieties people enjoy growing, or how a seed is beginning to, it's kind of how a seed is moving across London kind of from generation to generation, or how a variety is beginning to adapt to a certain growing condition in London as well. And I just thought it was interesting that from 1898, like if you could have captured some more anecdotal information at the time as well. And I saw that, that the Herbaria United project had like 50,000 of the specimens that were available at the South London Botanical Institute, which obviously we don't have anything like that number, but these kind of attempts to capture and digitize all this information historically and log this just kind of year on year means that you can see patterns emerge about which varieties are adapting well, how climate change is affecting certain varieties, and kind of how all these other kind of scientific information that you can capture, but also the anecdotal information that we are aiming to capture here, and the relationships that you have between these growers. And the database itself has become kind of a way for us to enable swapping physical seeds in the absence of being able to attend seed swaps, which has been really good to be able to facilitate that when people have been at home. But it's also been a way for us to collect and share grower knowledge, non-human genetic seed knowledge, and also the kind of grower to grower, grower to seed generation to generation relationships as well. And it's raised a lot of questions for us as a seed bank and as a living seed bank, and what our purpose is. And we, are hoping that it can kind of become, and already is, a resource that can be widely used for our network and larger, and kind of work on it becoming more of a common, or like commons form of information as well as it grows. What we're going to hear now is from Patrick, one of our superstar growers, who I looked on the database today and saw that he had shared 20 seed batches in 2020, just as one of the other ways you can kind of use the database to bring up information like this. And yeah, if Patrick's just going to go through a bit about himself and how you got involved in the seed bank as well. And I'll pass over to Patrick just now.
Great, thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I think my story's like a lot of allotment kind of growers, in that I got an allotment, having grown up with parents that gardened. But to be honest, I think time-wise, I just got the allotment, didn't think a lot about necessarily what I was growing. I just thought I'll grow things that I like. And I think I just by chance hit on the Real Seed company in Wales, and I was really struck by, they were really encouraging you to seed save. And and that's when I started to become a little bit more aware. And also I had saved seeds, but I didn't really know why I was producing a lot of mutant vegetables or my own variety, perhaps. And of course I hadn't learned about what things cross and what things don't, what kind of things are easy to save and kind of save them true. And then the opportunity came up in 2018. I did some training. So basically that reskilling aspect that Anna talked about is that I attended I think it was a 6-week training event and series of trainings. And that really kind of quite transformed, because I think while I was becoming more aware of things, like I had no sense of the loss of genetic diversity that had been happening in terms of kind of vegetable growing. So I was really aware of issues about kind of flavor. I was very aware that supermarkets were very limited and necessary in what they provide in terms of different variety. So that's what's kind of started the journey really for me. And for me, like, gardening is as much, it's a very spiritual aspect for me. It's very much about my well-being. But also I see seed saving is inherently political now, because it's like with so little seed in some ways outside of the control of certain companies, for me it's been really important to realize that actually I can make really different choices about what I grow, and I can grow things that I can share with others. And so that's what kind of motivates me particularly to kind of share back to the seed bank. And I have to tell you, the Airtable has just made it so much more easier. And I've noticed it's just so much more streamlined. And I'm someone that has dyspraxia, so it's a little bit, coordination can be a bit of a challenge. And generally I find it really easy to use, and I like the different ways that I can kind of view things. But also I guess it's important to remember that one of the reasons I grow things is because I like to eat them. And it's also about like thinking about flavor. So these are just some of the things that I have grown, like Galena tomato. I guess I'll start there because it was one of my first things after learning about seed saving tomatoes from Real Seeds, that I just started saving my tomato seeds. And by the time I donated some Galena tomatoes to the seed bank, I think the seeds were in their 4th generation of me growing them. And I grow I grow very local. I grow on Rosendale Gardens allotment, Gunsite allotments, and in West Dulwich and Rosendale Gardens Estate. It's a small patch. So I'm really lucky I have access to different places to grow. Galena is a Siberian tomato, and it's absolutely delicious. It's kind of, it's indeterminate, so keeps growing. I tend not to, like a lot of people, cut it to stop the growing early, because it fruits early, but then it just seems to keep fruiting. So it's normally really only later in the season might I kind of stop the growth, because I've always found like I've just got like an abundance of the most delicious tasting tomatoes. And I like to share about Galena because I donated that to the seed bank. And then I was on a talk last year during the lockdown, and that incredible edible Lambeth had. And then there were people there talking about how they were given seed by Richard, who was doing a training there from the seed bank. And then they were then saving Galena tomato seeds, and then they were donating it back to the seed bank. So suddenly you realize that if you kind of save seed and kind of start sharing it with others, it's fascinating like how many other people start growing this and sharing it. And so I think it's really reinforced for me the whole, you actually can have an impact. You can start kind of shaping what other people grow. And last year I didn't grow it, and someone gave me a plant that they didn't need, that was from seed that I'd given them. And, you know, and it's just it's a nice feeling. Also, so that's Galena. Potty Marion is interesting. So it's a red curry squash. It's in what called the Hubbard squash family, named after an American woman, the Hubbard squashes. And what's interesting, they have, maybe not quite so easy, but they have a very tear-shaped kind of look about them. And and they're known by different names. So they're known by red curry. They used to be known as onion squash in England. So I don't know if anyone's listening who's grown it as onion squash. The reason I called mine Potty Marion, because I was given it from allotment people who'd originally sourced the seed in France. So, and so that hence its name, hence the French name. And what I liked about this is pumpkins generally cross. The people who gave them the seed had been saved, it was like 6 generations that they'd been growing it on their allotment, and they'd never isolated it, and it had never crossed. And so I grew it and didn't isolate it, and it doesn't appear to cross, because this is also the picture we see here of it is from, actually I think it's from one of the directors, Charlotte, of the Freedom Seed Bank. She'd grown it out, and again it hasn't crossed. So that was my attraction, because it requires a level of attention to detail and timing to kind of isolate your pumpkins and stuff. So, and what's also nice about this pumpkin is the size of it. So it tends to be between 3 and 6 pounds, or 1.3 to 2.6 kgs, and it's a really nice one if you're just a couple of people. Stores really well throughout the winter. It's really nice in soups, nice in curries. It's thin skinned, and to me that's always a plus if you don't have to peel the skin and you can just eat it. So it's a great time saver. So that's part of growing that for me. And it takes about 85 days to grow to maturity. Now the other 3 bean seeds that are up here are all bean seeds that have been given through the London Freedom Seed Bank. So the Masi Bush bean is just an absolutely delightful dwarf bush bean. So great for people with small spaces. It's like a fillet type bean. It's very straight, tender. I mean, it's really delicious. It's kind of like a bean I could just nibble raw. So I think that's always a good recommendation. So Charlotte got it from you'll see here on the slide, if you can read that, she got it from in Minnesota from Growing West Side Seed Library in 2015. So the other thing that I like about this bean, I grew it out and sent the seeds back, and this is a tip for seed savers here, is that it had a bean weevil. And so the bean weevil actually managed to devour most of the kind of seeds. So if you freeze your bean seeds for a couple of weeks in the freezer, some people even store their beans in freezers, then you're much less likely to have problems with weevils. And so I've got this. So my remaining seeds I tried to grow out and had a very bad year last year where a lot of them got eaten. So I'll be growing them again this year, just mainly to make sure that it's still being shared amongst, that there's seed available to be shared amongst others, and I will just keep growing it for myself. So I guess all of these vegetables that I've got up here are all things that for me, they will be staples of my allotment growing, because of my enjoyment of them, really. So we've got Cherokee Trail of Tears. For those that don't know it, the name refers to the Cherokee people, and they were forcibly marched, I think it was in about 1839, by the government from Tennessee to Oklahoma. And of course, many people died, and it meant suffering kind of on the way. And this is one of their beans. And again, this was donated to one of the other seed bank directors. And again, it's a pole bean. It's really kind of vigorous, or climbing bean, very vigorous, tall. It's really produces lots of beans. It's really nice, just as you would have a green French bean, kind of eating it steamed or salad, or actually drying it and having it as a dried bean. So I kind of like the versatility kind of it. And I think what it kind of also shows is that for many people, like it's also about culture, and it's also about the stories, and it's also like seed saving has been a way that people share their family histories or cultural histories through kind of what they've grown. And again, I think the seed bank and the information we're sharing gives an opportunity to kind of have that information captured and kind of shared for others. Now, Nut Custom is the bean on the end, which is just delightful looking. It gets its name through, it was donated to the seed bank in 2015 by a Slovak family, and they had a custom in midwinter of throwing one of the beans into the corner of each room of the house, each part of the house, and it was meant to bring them good luck and good fortune. I think it was something that they would say as they did it. And it's very similar looking to a bean that was called George's bean, which the Heritage Seed Library often has had available kind of for people who are members of that to obtain seed from it. But it has been grown out by a seed grower, and there are discernible differences in the two beans. So hence it's been kept under this different name of Nut Custom. It's again, it's delicious fresh. I only had a few dried, so I didn't make baked beans out of it. But it is good for that. Mainly because we really wanted to kind of increase the amount that was kind of being made available for other people to kind of share. And so hopefully we'll see more of this bean be donated back to the kind of seed bank. I mean, I found it just delicious. I really hope to kind of, now that I've given a good donation to the seed bank, hope to grow out a lot more, to just kind of look at, like, so that I have more of it available for myself to use dried. And yeah, I think that's kind of a little bit about some of the seeds that I'm saving. We'll have plenty of time for questions. Another one that's not up there, which I'm kind of gave a few seeds on, was a seed called True Black Brandy Wine, and it's a beefsteak tomato, and kind of I like it in the sense that it's a real classic kind of seed saving kind of story, in that I talked to my allotment neighbour. He gave me 3 plants. That's what they were. It was the most delicious, sweet eating beefsteak tomato, and it was a kind of tomato you'd happily just sit and eat like an apple almost. It was great. And what I like about it, he obtained it from real seed, Baker Creek seeds in the US. The origins of it are in I've got a note. The origins of it were that it was originally part of a seeds were produced in the UK, part of its heritage, which was a red or raspberry coloured Brandywine tomato. Brandywine tomatoes are like beefsteak tomatoes, and they've been a real sort of iconic heirloom tomato in the US. And it was originally, as I said, came from a grower in the UK. That grower shared seeds unnamed with someone in the US. So it's kind of who then crossed it with something else, and then you get this great tomato. It's not there to see, but it kind of, for me, it illustrates lots of the different connections. And what I'm struck by is that there was so much more skills and knowledge. So many more people were kind of breeding kind of vegetables, breeding particular varieties, kind of sharing them amongst people. That's still happening today, but I'm really committed to the work of the seed bank, because I think it kind of continues to promote kind of this reskilling. We've got like a member, Richard, who he's breeding lettuce varieties. This is really important, because not only is it about flavour, but we don't also know how much more nutritional benefit there might be in some of the heritage varieties that's been lost by some of the sort of breeding of some of the more commercial available varieties. So yeah, so I guess that's the main thing I want to say. I'll leave it there, and I'm sure people might have some questions.
Thank you, Patrick and Anna. That was great, really interesting. Nell, are you recording? Okay. Oh, well, that last slide's good, because before we went on